Okay, so now I want to point out another symbol representing wisdom in the Bible. Now, the ancients used the woman to represent wisdom. She represented the spirit of wisdom, the Holy Spirit. But we also have the serpent as an ancient symbol that also represent wisdom. Now, what you're looking at here is a symbol of two serpents intertwined to your left, and it's side by side with the symbol for DNA. And this is because DNA is the first or the origin of knowledge for each and every one of us, right? This is where you, before anyone teach you anything, right? This is information that's passed down from one generation to another, and it's passed down to you as information encoded within your DNA. So we see the intertwined serpents representing the symbol for DNA, but over to the right, we also have it a sign for medicine as well. Now, this is a work called Sacred Mysteries Amongst the Mayans and the Quiches by Augustus Laplunge. But here we're going to see what he have to say about the symbol of the serpent. Start at the very bottom of page 98. From the remotest antiquity, the serpent was held by every people in the greatest veneration as the embodiment of divine wisdom. We have already said that Eusebius asserts that the Egyptians figured emblematically Nif, the creator, as a serpent, and that the Mayan learned priest represented the engendered, the ancestor of all beings, in the sculptures protected within the claws of a serpent. Again, we see the serpent is one of the oldest and most widespread mythological symbols. Serpents serve as both positive and negative symbols, with connotations ranging from deceitfulness to healing powers. Serpents, due to the shedding of their skin, are also associated with regeneration and rebirth. So now let's deal with the serpent as esoteric wisdom. When dealing with the script, again, I'm using the Blue Letter Bible online. You can follow along if you like. But in the manuscript, we see the term serpent, and it correlates to H5175. And then again, it traces in the etymology bracket to the right, it traces to H5172, Nahas. Nahas. And this means to hiss, to whisper a spell, to practice divination, observe signs, omens, to learn by experience, to prognosticate. See, the serpent represents the highest form of wisdom in our physical world. And when I say our physical world, when I say the serpent is the highest form of wisdom in the world, in this physical world, I mean terrestrial and celestial, right? I mean from the earth and all the wisdom that's found here on earth, and also all the wisdom that's contained in the heavens within the sun, moon, stars, and the different planets. Now, only the spiritual wisdom from the Most High is greater. And so again, we have three levels. We have the spiritual realm, the celestial realm, and the terrestrial realm. When dealing with serpent wisdom, we're dealing with esoteric or hidden wisdom from carnal, which is earthly wisdom, and celestial wisdom that's wrapped into like astronomy and astrology and the different wisdom that's found within these sciences. And the serpent, just like the woman, also have two different identities. One representing the seraphim or the fiery serpent from above, and the other is the viper or the poisonous venomous snake from below, which will give you the good and the evil. For example, herbalism will be considered one of the sciences that will be a part of esoteric wisdom, right? Now, you can use herbs to heal, or you can use herbs as a potion of poison, right? You have black magic and white magic. I mean, you have the dualism of good and evil wrapped up in what's known as esoteric wisdom, encompassing all the wisdom, carnal wisdom on this earth, going up into the celestial world. All the wisdom there is to be had is wrapped up in this category. Now, when you look at Matthew the 10th chapter, 16th verse, you see the Messiah telling his disciples to be as wise as serpents, but as gentle as doves. So again, I just want to point out that the serpent is a symbol for wisdom in the Bible as well. So now I want to point out the serpent as a symbol of ascension, right? Because we see how the serpent slides on his belly, which represented someone moving in their lower self and raising up to stand upright, or someone who's operating or ascended up into their high self, right? So the parable of Jacob's ladder, thought I'd go ahead and break this down real quick. So Genesis 28:12 speaks of this ladder that's reaching up into heaven, and there's angels ascending and descending upon it. So first off, when you look at the spine, we're going to use the serpent as a symbol for the spine in the brain. Now, when looking at the spine, you have vertebrae. These vertebrae will be considered the steps, and there's 33 vertebrae. But these are the steps from your lower self to your higher self. And then you have the angels that are ascending and descending up and down the ladder, which represents your nerves, right? Because angels are messengers. And these nerves that run up and down the spine is what send messages from the higher self to the lower self, right? From up from the top of the spine to the bottom of the spine, right? And so there's an opening right where the spine and the brain meet. There's an opening where the spine go in, and that opening is called the foramen magnum. The foramen magnum. Now, magnum meaning in Latin, it means great. So this is Amen the Great. When you go to Revelations, the 3rd chapter, 14th verse, you see the Messiah is called the Amen and the faithful witness. Why? Because remember, he said, no man come to the Father except through me, right? That passageway, that gate that enters into the higher self or the Holy of Holies is the foramen magnum, and no one gets to the higher self or to the pineal gland without first going through that opening or that gateway. We see the place that Jacob wrestled with the angel was called Peniel. Now again, this is a play on the word pineal, stating that Jacob was dealing with this whole situation from a vision, right? He was dealing with this in his third eye. Now let's deal with the serpent as the brazen serpent of Moses. In Numbers 21st chapter, verses 6 through 9, we see that there were serpents that were sent amongst the people, and those serpents bit the people. A lot of those people died. Moses prayed to the Most High. The Most High told him to pick up one of the fiery serpents, put it on the pole, and put it in the air. And whoever looked to the serpent would live. And so what Moses was doing, he took that serpent and put it on the pole representing the tree of life. And now this serpent, again, this serpent is representing wisdom from above. He's taking the serpent and he's putting it back up in the sky. See, when I said the serpent had two identities, he represented the seraphim or the serpent from above, the fiery serpent from above, which represents the good or the higher wisdom. And then he represents the viper or the venomous snake, which represents the lower evil, right? And so when Moses raised the serpent up, he was putting the serpent back in the sky. See, when the curse was called down on the serpent for what took place in the garden, the serpent was said that it was said that the serpent would have to lick up the dust. You know, he would move on his belly and he would have to lick up the dust all the days of his life. That's because the serpent was the seraphim or the dragon at first. He represented a serpent from above, and he got his wings too. This is why I said there was no more place found for him in heaven. The Most High took his wings. And so what you see is this serpent being lifted up, now representing the wisdom from above. Again, also, as I showed the brain and the spine connected as a symbol for the serpent, we also see that the serpent represents the flesh, right? It represents the brain down to the spine and all the nerves and the senses, the five senses, what you see, smell, touch, taste, all of these things are within the power of the serpent. And so like the Messiah said, just like the serpent had to be lifted up in the wilderness, so must I be lifted up. Because what he was teaching them was that in order for you to ascend into the spirit, you have to crucify this flesh. You have to kill the serpent, right? But when you go to Matthew, the 3rd chapter, 7th verse, we see John the Baptist called the priest vipers. He called the Pharisees and the scribes vipers. Matthew, the 23rd chapter, 33rd verse, we see Yahshua calling the priests serpents and vipers, meaning that symbolically these priests represented the seed of the serpent or the sons of the serpent. They were those who were in possession of this esoteric wisdom that was deceiving and manipulating the people and biting the people with their poisonous venom here on earth. Mark 16, chapter 18th verse, we see the Messiah is saying that these are certain signs that will follow those people who believe in the doctrine that he brought. And one of those signs is that they will be able to take up serpents, right? And so the Christians have taught in the past that that meant that you could literally pick up a serpent and that if it bit you, it won't harm you. But that's not what we're talking about. To take up a serpent means that you're now able to deal with this esoteric wisdom without falling prey to its bite, right? Because now you're being led by the spirit from above. You have the spirit of the Son, the anointing upon you. So now you're able to handle these esoteric doctrines without falling victim to them. Because, you know, there's certain aspects of it that are evil. And, you know, when the flesh starts to lust after something and you veer off into that, you might never come back, right? So you can really get caught up dealing with these different systems if you don't understand what you're dealing with. But anyway, you'd be able to take up serpents and not get bit. Also in Luke the 10th chapter, 19th verse, he said, I give you power to tread on serpents and over all the power of the enemy. See, to tread on serpents mean that you will be given a wisdom that's above anyone who was in possession of this esoteric wisdom of good and evil here on earth. When you see the showdown between Moses and the sorcerers, magicians that was in Egypt, what you're looking at is Moses treading upon serpents. His wisdom was more superior than theirs. Again, when you saw Moses take his rod and throw his rod to the earth, his rod became a serpent, right? And his rod, his serpent, swallowed up the serpents of the magicians and sorcerers, meaning that his wisdom was because it was backed by the spirit, right? He didn't just have the same esoteric wisdom they had. He had that wisdom, but he had a deeper insight because it was connected to the spirit. So now this is going to throw light on what took place in the garden, right? This is going to throw light because what we were looking at with the serpent and the woman in the garden, you're not looking at a literal serpent or a literal woman. You're looking at two types of wisdom, right? And it is Adam who is the possessor of the wisdom of Eve, right? That is being tempted by the serpent, which also represents his flesh. When I showed the symbol of the brain and the spine, this is Adam looking at this wisdom and saying within itself this conversation. And so the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Most High had made. This is Genesis, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 7. And we see that the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, right? Subtle meaning wise or crafty. And he said unto the woman, yeah, had God said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High had said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. For God doeth know that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Remember that. Remember the aprons, because we're going to get back to that in a sec. But as you can see, the woman was tempted. And what she saw was, first off, she saw that the tree was good for food. Remember that. It was good for food. That it was pleasant to the eye. And a tree to be desired to make one wise. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Again, she saw that the tree was good for food. That's the lust of the flesh. She saw that it was pleasant to the eye, the lust of the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, the pride of life. You know, I want that title to be the wisest, the pride of life. These are the three forms of temptation that Adam was being tempted with. Now again, this is how Adam was tempted. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Most High, but of the world. When you go back to Genesis 3:6, you see, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, remember that, good for food, lust of the flesh, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, lust of the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. Pride of life. Now I'm going to show that this temptation that took place with Adam in the garden, and not necessarily with a woman, but Adam's wisdom was being tempted by his flesh, the lust of his flesh, which was the spine and the brain, the serpent, the flesh. Okay, so Matthew 4 chapter, verses 1 through 11. Remember, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. And Yahshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So in this parable, I want you to look at the devil as the serpent. In the same way the Spirit is leading Yahshua is how Eve was leading Adam. This is why Eve partook of the fruit first, then gave it to Adam, because that was Adam being led by his wisdom. Yahshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights afterwards, he was hungry. Okay, so now he go to lust of the flesh. Now when the tempter came to him, he said, if you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread. But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded from the mouth of the Most High. Then the devil took him up into this holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the city, of the temple, and said to him, if you be the Son of God, throw yourself down. Now he's dealing with the pride of life. He's messing with his pride. Okay, if you the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he shall give his angels charge over you, and in their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. And Yahshua said to him, it is also written, you shall not tempt the Most High your power. And so again the devil took him up on the exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. He showed him, right? It's the lust of the eyes. He saw this with his eyes. And he said unto him, all these things I will give unto you if you fall down and worship me. And Yahshua said unto him, away with you, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Most High your power, and him only shall you serve. And the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. So we see that Yahshua was tempted of the devil, and the way he was tempted through the lust of his flesh, the lust of his eyes, and the pride of life. And this is what took place in the garden with Adam. And what we're looking at in the garden is Adam's wisdom being tempted by the lust of his flesh. And so remember, I told you to remember the word apron. When you look at the word for apron, it corresponds to H2290 Hagar, right? And as you can see, where it says root word etymology, it tells you to go back to H2296, which is also Hagar. What that means is that Hagar, which was Abraham's wife, the Egyptian handmaid, represented a wisdom out of Egypt. Because she was an Egyptian handmaid, she represented a wisdom out of Egypt that was passed down from Adam and Eve in the garden, which was the apron of religion. It was used to hide their shame, right? So this is what that wisdom represented, the wisdom of the apron. And it's written right here in our scriptures that Hagar represented a certain type of wisdom and Sarah represented a certain type of wisdom. Galatians, the 4th chapter, 24th verse through 24, it reads, tell me, you that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by a bondmaid, another by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, and he who was of the free woman was by promise. Which things are an allegory for the two covenants, and the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar. You see, the Bible is filled with allegory and symbolism. It's wrapped up in these different parables, and it is telling you right here in Galatians that Hagar and Sarah represent two covenants or two types of wisdom. Again, this is showing the woman not only as wisdom, but as covenants as well. But when you enter into a covenant with a certain type of wisdom, it's the same as being married to your wife. And so Abraham being joined to Hagar is symbolic to him being joined to the wisdom of the apron that which he received in Egypt, which was basically the teachings that was passed down from Adam as the ancient form of religion. Now we're going to see the seed of the woman versus the seed of the serpent and the enmity that was placed between them. Genesis the 3rd chapter 15th verse state, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. It shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And so we see that the Most High put enmity, or put a beef between the woman's seed and the serpent seed. Galatians the 5th chapter 17th verse says, the flesh lust against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these things are contrary one to another. That's the enmity, right? That's the friction between the two. The spirit and the flesh always warring against one another. So again, this is going to show that the woman symbolizes the spirit, the wisdom of the spirit, and the serpent representing the wisdom of the world. And the children of the spirit, the sons of God, are also Israel, the sons of Sarah, or the priest kings. This is the seed of the woman, right? And then you have the serpent, which represent the wisdom of the world. And this is backed up by the wise men, the sorcerers, and the magicians. These are the seed of the serpent. And throughout your Bible, you see the Chaldeans, Egyptians, Canaanites, Persians, Babylonians, Greeks, and Romans. All of these represented the priesthood. These were different priesthoods and different civilizations that all carried this high form of serpent wisdom.